checking out the Sportsline podcast on CHCH. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Folks, I'm always proud to say that Southern Ontario is the place for high-level sports, successful organizations, executives, and in today's case, we have an athlete from the 519 area code who's been so fun to cheer for over the years. Born in Brampton, but he grew up in Brantford, hitting his father's cut-down three-wood at the tender age of 3 years old. From his days of attending North Park Collegiate, playing golf was his selected passion. And after playing collegiate ball at the University of Wyoming, David Hearn turned professional. In a career that has covered 25 years, Hearn was one of golf's modern-day breakthrough Canadians, opening doors for fellows like Connors, Hughes, Pendrith, and Taylor. In addition, he's represented the nation at the Olympics. And folks, when it comes to Canada, how about that close call at Glen Abbey in 2015? So pleased to connect with the pride of the Bell City, now residing in South Florida, David Hearn. This is a great honor for myself. It's been so long since I stuck a mic in front of you back in those early days in the 2000s. So it's great to catch up with you. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Bubba. That was a good recap. That was some good highlights there.
There was just wonderful years. And let's go back to a couple of those things that were just so special for so many of us in this area. We're watching you in the beginning of your career. But let's go all the way back. Is it fair to say that the fact that you lived so close to the Brantford Golf and Country Club and that your father were the reasons why you became what you became?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my story of getting introduced to the game came from my father. We used to spend our summers up in the Mount Forest area, and that's kind of where he cut down that club. And we had a little bit of acreage up there. We had a summer place we'd go to that was in sort of the farm area up there. So I would hit balls on the field for hours and hours. And, it was a great introduction to the game. And as I got better and as I developed and as I needed to hone my skills more, I joined the Brantford Golf and Country Club as a teenager, and it definitely helped me propel myself to the next levels and got me going into my career.
In those adolescent years, there are so many things. Your life is so busy as a teenager and a lot's going on, girlfriend, school, sports. Was there anything else that kind of pulled you, or was it going to be golf all the way?
Yeah, I think like most Canadians, you kind of grow up on skates and playing hockey. But I think, I just wasn't a very big kid. I was a good little athlete, but, I just think I always knew it was going to be golf. I remember my dad taking me to the Canadian Open. There was a skins game at Glen Abbey when I was a kid that I went to. And I just always loved being at the golf course. I love watching the guys practice, trying to learn and get better. And, I think for me, it was just always going to be golf.
I read somewhere a long time ago that you used to, when the Open was at the Abbey consistently, that you would just love to follow the golfers around. Is that true?
That is true. I think a lot of people try to take in golf events in different ways. And I don't know if this was sort of my dad or this was myself, but we used to like to go and we would watch players kind of start their round and follow them all the way around for 18 holes. One of the benefits to that as a young kid, you get a lot of golf balls tossed to you. So maybe that was part of the reason I liked doing it. And, I remember following guys like Freddie Couples and, Nick Price when he was up there, Bruce Litsky. There were a lot of big names at the time that used to play the Canadian Open. And it was fun for me to go and just follow them from the first hole to the 18th. It is entertaining to kind of sit on a hole, maybe a par 3, and watch shots come in and see some birdies being made. But to be able to follow a player from beginning to end, you really get a little bit more insight as to how to put together a round of golf. And, I would say that was definitely some of my youngest experiences learning the game at the high level. And, it obviously paid off for me down the road.
When you get to your adolescence and you're at that teenage years, and there are so many opportunities right now for athletes, boys to play soccer, to play football, basketball, golf on a scholarship going somewhere else in the United States. It was very rare at the time for someone like yourself to get an opportunity to go to Wyoming. Obviously, you're a Brantford, Southern Ontario guy going to Wyoming. What kind of transition was that for you at that age?
I think the biggest transition for me was just sort of like leaving home. Wyoming was a long way from home. It was 3.5 hour plane flight. So that, it's when you're out there, you have to be very committed. But I think the one thing that was really amazing with that college sport environment, the NCAA, is, you're instantly part of a team. You have a family built in right away. As soon as I got to university, you show up about a week before school starts. You kind of like learn where you're on the campus. You instantly meet your teammates, and it's a community and a family right away. So for anybody that has the opportunity to go to the United States on a sports scholarship of any kind, I recommend it, because I think obviously there's a lot of things going on when you go to university, your academics and the social life, but being a part of that community and going through those years together was something special. And it really helped me get through it all. That's for sure. It was a great opportunity, and I loved it. I have great memories of being at Wyoming.
When you complete those years at the university, again, unlike other sports, there's not a draft, there's not a free agent. Golf, you're an independent contractor. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made, I would believe, to decide I'm going to play professional golf. What were the factors that said I'm going all the way on this for you?
Maybe it was just sort of like me being young and naive. I just, when I was in high school, I always felt like, okay, the next step is I'm going to go to university. I'll play for D1 program. And I was fortunate, and I did that. I was on scholarship at University of Wyoming that we just talked about. And when I was at Wyoming, it was always just sort of like, I'm going to practice and play and get better and play these amateur tournaments, and I'm going to turn pro when I'm done. And, that's what I did. And then when I turned pro, I went and got my Canadian Tour card pretty much right away. And in the back of my head I was always like, okay, I'm going to play on the Canadian Tour so I can get better and play on the Corn Ferry Tour. And then I'm going to move off of that onto the PGA. And I actually managed to do that within 3 years of turning pro. So I had a very quick transition of getting to the highest levels of the game. But I think it was just sort of like my mentality that, it was always trying to build on that next step. When you kind of get to that next level, it wasn't like, oh, I'm just happy to be here. I always kept competing and working hard and trying to learn and get better. So, I'm not sure what clicked off in my head at any point in time, but it was just more of, like I say, maybe I was just young and naive. I just was like, okay, I'm going to the next level. I'm going next level. And I just kept doing it.
Well, it's amazing that you have that mentality of just, as he's called it, naive in some ways. But golf is such an interesting sport where there's I guess I would call it the success and failure level. It's just bouncing back and forth. And again, not just one game. You've got to be on top for 4 rounds of golf. What kind of mental capabilities did you have to build as a professional now knowing that this is how I'm earning a paycheck?
Yeah, and I think that, the best players in the world really try to keep the idea of like money and how much you're earning kind of out of it. And I think if you can just really boil it down to, trying to compete and do the best you can each and every day, the money and everything else kind of takes care of itself. And I guess, I talk about, maybe I was a bit young and naive, but I always had pretty good self-belief in myself. I always thought that, whenever I stepped up to the next level, I always knew that I had the game to compete, and I knew I had what it took to stay out there. So, I did get to the PGA Tour, like I say, fairly quickly. I came off of it and went back on. I think you learn a lot as you kind of go through the journey. It's never a straight line. Even for those guys on the PGA Tour, there's always ups and downs. But the one thing that, now I have 3 young children, and, they're all involved in their academics and their sports and everything like that. And the thing that I try to impress upon them is no matter what level you're at, the best athletes in the world are always just trying to compete and get better. That's a mindset that you have to have, I think in life and in sports. And if you do that, it kind of keeps that money thing out of the back of your head, and that allows you to perform at your best. I think when people only think about money or sort of the result or everything, like, you're not going to get the best out of yourself.
You talked about, again, being at the Canadian Open and following these great golfers at the time, and Nicky Price, and as you talked about Fred Couples. What was it like that years later, you're now competing against them? How were they in terms of a relationship with you, young guy on the tour, bright-eyed, looking around, maybe some new courses? What was that adjustment like?
Yeah, that was a pretty neat moment, I must say. Freddie Couples was one of my childhood heroes. I remember Tom Lehman was another one of my players that I looked up to, just an amazing ball striker. I had, and those guys treated me so well at the Canadian Open. I can tell you stories of, there would be shuttles coming up out of the valley at Glen Abbey, and guys would be like, come on, hop in the van. And, they'd give you a ride up to the top of the hill. And, I'm just like, a little 8, 9, 10-year-old kid. So when you get a chance to finally be at the same stage and level as these guys, you do have to pinch yourself for a second. But I remember, the first time I kind of came across Freddie Couples when I had my full tour card. We were in at the Shell Houston Open, it was called at the time, and this was back in 2005. And I only had the chance to play because Freddie's a little bit older than I am, so we only actually played on tour together for 1 year. But I remember we were walking from the clubhouse out to the driving range, and we just got sort of chatting about whatever. And it was, you get these 7 a.m. tee times in your you're warming up in the dark under lights. And I remember Freddie, we were just talking about whatever, and he was complaining about what kind of sport are we involved in? We're warming up in the dark. Like, this is ridiculous. So anyway, it's kind of a surreal moment when, you grow up watching these guys. Next thing you know, you're just sort of shooting the breeze with them as you're about to go warm up and play. So it's an amazing feeling. And like I say, you have to kind of step back and realize you've accomplished some pretty good things.
You talk about accomplishments, and I'm going to kind of parallel some things that you've pulled off in your PGA career with, like, the Buffalo Bills. And it's funny because we look at the Buffalo Bills and we say to ourselves, oh my goodness, they lost 4 Super Bowls. But it's funny, years later, you look at all the Hall of Famers, and we celebrate that team. And I'm going to just kind of parallel that with the 2013 John Deere, the 2015 Greenbrier. You were just so close to that first PGA win. Can you kind of take us back to those moments and what was going through your head, knowing that, the opportunity at victory was right there?
Yeah, and it's you're when you're in the moment, you don't think a lot about it, and you don't realize I had a great run at the John Deere, and it's amazing how history can kind of change itself. Like, who knows what would have happened if I had made the putt when I had a bad lip out there at the John Deere that kind of cost me the tournament, and if that goes in, what might have happened differently? Maybe I rest on my success a little more and I don't do as much after, or maybe it propels you into the next stages. Like, who knows what'll happen? And obviously, Jordan went on to do what he did. But, I think that, it was, I was close a lot of times. I never did quite break through. It was a bit unfortunate. Some guys kind of get in those positions very few times and they pull it through every time. I always prided myself on being a consistent player. So, I didn't really take those losses as too much of a lump. I just felt like, okay, I'm going to get there again. And I did get there multiple more times. But, unfortunately, I never did pull off that victory. But, I feel like you say, when I look at my career in total, I achieved so much. I was able to represent Canada, like you mentioned earlier, at the Olympics and at the World Cup. And, I played in all the majors except Augusta. So, I feel like, I don't have a lot of regrets in the way it went. I would have loved to have held more trophies like that one there. That was for being low Canadian at the RBC Canadian Open. It's people ask you about a lot of that stuff, but it was a great experience. I wouldn't change it. Maybe I got a chance to be a rookie again here in 4 or 5 years, and I'll hoist a few trophies when I get out with the champs.
And I can't, again, along the same line, 2015 Canadian Open, I was there. And it's different now. We've had some Canadians that are younger Canadians on the PGA Tour right now that are winning. So I almost feel like we're kind of getting used to it. But at the time when you were competing, especially 2015 at the Abbey, at that point it had been 61 years since a Canadian had won the Open, and you were right there through 54. Jason Day was a great golfer at that time. Freddie Couples, not Freddie, Bubba Watson, great golfer at that time. And you were right there. You were right there. And I thought you played good golf on your 4th round. So close.
Yeah, and the way that Canadian Open kind of finished up, I definitely. I got off to a great start. I made a couple birdies early in that round. I kind of treaded water through the middle of the round and then had a chance kind of late. But, Jason Day was on a course at that time. He ended up being world number 1 shortly after he won that Canadian Open. And, as much as any pro sport will teach you, is you can only control what you're doing, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Like I feel very proud of the way I played all 4 rounds in that tournament. It didn't work out my way. Jason Day just ended up a few shots clear of what I was at. But I can't control what he does. If we did it all again, maybe he doesn't end up winning the tournament and I did enough to win. It's just the way the nature of sports is. Sometimes, you go back to one of the most famous moments at Glen Abbey when Tiger hit that 6-iron out of the bunker from the right side on 18 to that back right pin. I think those guys were well clear of it was Grant Waite who finished second that year. And I think they were 6 or 8 shots clear of the next guy. And Grant Waite probably gets in the clubhouse at 20 under thinking, I got this thing. And Tiger hits this miracle shot to the back right pin. What can you do? I mean, that's just the nature of sports. Sometimes you give it everything you have and somebody just has a bit more. And sometimes you do, and you end up winning. So it was a great event. There's memories there at that tournament that I'll never forget. The ovation that I got on the first tee,
yes.
The way the fans were, it was truly an incredible moment. And then, when Nick Taylor ended up winning it a couple of years ago, I think all of us were so proud that a Canadian finally was able to hoist that trophy. And Weirzy was close. I was close. Adam Hadwin came close. So many close calls. It was great to see Nick hoist it. And, we can kind of get that little monkey off our back, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's probably great for a lot of the Canadian golfers that they don't have to go in on that Tuesday, wherever the Canadian Open is held those particular years, where you don't have to answer the question, are you going to be the first golfer since Walter Fletcher to win the Canadian Open, right? It was just every year. And as media people, we feel bad having to ask the question, but it was like we're thirsty for it.
And I kind of joked with some of the media the following year. I was like, are you guys going to ask, who's going to be the 1 year after? Are we going to go back down that line of questioning? But I think you're right. I think it's retired for a little while. And then, maybe if it doesn't happen again for a few years, they'll go back to, who's the next guy after Nick Taylor? So, it's and there's nobody, I think we're all like, Nick's such a great guy. I think we're all super proud that he was the guy to eventually kind of break it. And the way he did, in a playoff, holding that putt, is a pretty special moment for golf in Canada.
I mean, a national championship is the Canadian Open. I always consider the Players' Championship, where you finished tied for 6th one year, I consider that a major championship. And obviously there's the 4 major championships. Can you explain to all of us why it's so different? The major championships and the preparation that goes into it, why it's just that little bit higher in terms of the priority for all golfers.
Yeah, so all the tournaments that we play on the PGA Tour, they all have the sort of like entry criteria. So you have your sort of like standard open events, like close to where I live here in Florida now, the Cognizant Classic was held, that has their standard entry criteria. All the majors have their own entry criteria as well. And just the difficulty to get into those events is just that much higher. They're trying to get the players that are clearly the best players in the game, the top players in the world. The Players' Championship, some would argue, like you were just saying, is at that level of being a major championship. And if you were to look at the strength of field, absolutely it is. It would be considered one of the top events, one of the premier events on the PGA Tour that just about every player inside the top 100 in the world ranking plays in it every year. It is a super strong field. And so I think that, as any athlete wants to do, you want to prove yourself against the best. So I think that's just like in tennis with their 4 major championships or any of the sport, like, hockey playoffs are about to start. I think that the idea that you beat the best kind of proves yourself as a player. So, I think that's why players really look forward to those major championships and events like the Players' Championship. And I always loved going to TPC Sawgrass and playing that event. I had a good record there. I got into a number of major championships over the year, and I had some, varying success. They set up the golf course as tough as can be, and you're playing the best players in the world. That's what draws people in. That's what gets excitement going for everybody.
I know you never got to compete there, but you know all too well about it, and I know you've even been a commentator there. Can you explain to all of us what is the romantic the romanticism, the appeal, the love for Augusta National, where we're going to start in a couple of days from now in the 2025 Masters. Why is it just so special?
I think anyone that's been there just realizes what a special golf course it is. You know, that's first and foremost. I think it is just a beautiful golf course visually, but it's also a very challenging golf course. I think that it also kind of like, especially from people like ourselves from up north, it kind of is symbolic of the beginning of the golf season. So I think for Canadians especially, we love the idea of Augusta and the Masters, because it's kind of like, okay, golf courses are opening. This is the beginning of the season. It gets everybody excited. You know, this particular tournament is the smallest field, so it is the most exclusive of the major championships. You know, just all those little extras, you know, the condition of the golf course and the attention to detail. It's an incredible place. And I think the one thing that, you know, like the other championships like US Open and the Open Championship, they play some of the best golf courses in the world, but they are constantly moving their championship sites to kind of showcase the various great golf courses around the country. Every year we go back to Augusta National, and I think that resonates with people because you just have a familiarity with the golf course. There's a history built in that is tough to replicate. When you go to the same golf course each and every year, we all know that pin position on 16 is going to be in the back left on Sunday. We've all seen players hit the shots or Tiger hole out or, you know, whatever. So I think we all sort of like, you know, have a feeling like we know that golf course, even if you've never played it. So I think that makes it special too. You know, it's a wonderful way to kick off the major season. I'm excited to watch this week. I know players, you know, the guys that don't get in, we all love watching it. It's an entertaining tournament. And, you know, it truly is an amazing challenge. And, you know, that there's always going to be, you know, there's always upsets possible, but, you know, nobody really, to be at Augusta, it's the best of the best. There's no real upset when you get there. You've earned it when you win the Masters.
Hopefully, going into Sunday, maybe even the back nine, a Canadian would be involved. We have 4 in competition. Mike Weir, the 2003 winner. Laura, we can go up to the board there with the Canadians there. Taylor, Nick. I think Corey's got the game. He's had that experience, I think, of playing on a Sunday, obviously finishing 6th in 2022, but there's also been some other close calls. Is he the guy to look forward to possibly break through as another Canadian to win the Masters?
Yeah, interesting you bring up his name right away. He's been in contention, like not necessarily in the last couple groups, but he's been around that top 10 for a number of years at that tournament. There was a stat that I just read, I think maybe a day or two ago, and it's, you know, you see all these betting line things now, and it was basically talking about the last 3 or 4 years, the champion of Augusta has gained, we've got all these amazing stats that they keep now. So the strokes gain metric is something that they use a lot now. So basically they said the last 4 champions have all been leading up to Augusta National, have gained at least 40 strokes in the previous 3 or 4 tournaments leading up to the tournament. It's kind of a convoluted stat, but it just basically is talking about how well players are playing coming into the Augusta National tournament, to the Masters. And there's only maybe 10 or 12 guys on that list this year that have gained 40 strokes in their last few events leading up to the Masters. And the player that was number 2 on the list was Corey Connors. So there's no doubt in my mind that his ball striking, the way his tee to green game is very suited to a golf course like that. The green complexes are so big, and there's so many little areas and pockets, and you just have to be so dialed in with your iron play. Corey has that ability. He's a very good putter of the ball. He's a great driver of the ball. He has all the areas of the game to do it, but his ball striking would definitely carries him through at a golf course like this. And yeah, I would expect him to have another good week this year. I mean, winning, who knows, but I would expect him to be in the mix.
On April Fool's, Tiger Woods hit social media. You know, obviously we all know that he blew his Achilles once again. And he said, oh, I've been in the hyperbolic chamber and I've been working out and I'm going to be at the Masters. And I will be honest with you. I knew it was April Fool's Day, but I believed him. And then I would go back to look at online and saw how many people were excited about Tiger Woods. What is he, 47 years old right now? That he was going to be competing at Augusta. Can you please, Dave, you lived through the era. You played against the man. What is it about Tiger Woods that's still, like, I don't think he'll ever win a major again, but why do we still want to believe?
Yeah, I think, he's just one of those sort of like figures that kind of transcends all areas of like life and sport. I think he's had an amazing career, obviously, on the golf course. You can debate whatever you want about him and Nicklaus. You only have to be the best of your generation, and nobody came close to what he did in our generation. It's incredible the way he played, how dominant he was when he won. And I think people just sort of like have built up this figure with him. And there's no doubt that, when he's involved with something, people want to watch. And I think he's just sort of this larger than life figure when it comes to golf. I remember when he was in his prime. I mean, it was like players had a hard time, even if they weren't playing in his group. If he was making a charge, guys just had that in the back of their head. It was just really hard to put together a good round when he was making that charge, because you knew he was going to do something down the stretch. And there was a record where, I think he went years where, like, on Sunday, nobody beat him in his group. Like, if you played with him, you just had no chance. So he just an incredible figure. And I think, the fact that he's shown some human side to him the last few years, I think people love the comeback story. And it was amazing to see him come back and win again on the PGA Tour after, going through so much a few years back. And, I agree with you. I think this time, finally, with the injuries he sustained in that car accident, and then now the Achilles injury, we're probably never going to see that Tiger that we once saw. And I think that people are just hoping to get a glimpse of what it was like when he was playing at his prime in the 2000s. But yeah, there's just something about him, I guess. He just is that kind of charismatic figure. Like I say, you could ask anybody in the world, about Tiger, and people instantly think of the golfer. It's impressive.
Who, as a golfer like yourself that knows so much about the sport, and we talk about Tiger, but who is it that you like to watch?
Oh, tough question. Very tough question. I could say right now I like watching my kids. I'm not on tour as much now as I once was. So yeah. I spent a lot more time watching them. But as a player, I think the game's changed so much. I think I still respect guys that not only have the power to overpower the game, but really think through the game really well. And, I know he's a bit of a polarizing figure these days, but I remember John Rahm was impressive to watch, and I had the opportunity to play with him. I think one of the most interesting guys to watch right now, and it's probably frustrating for a lot of people, is watching Rory McIlroy. I think we all want to see Rory get it done. And I think that, the eyes will always be on him winning the Players' Championship again this year. He's on form. I think coming into Augusta, I think a lot of people will be wanting him to put together a great week. I would say, somebody watching like him, I think we all loved watching the U.S. Open last year with Bryson DeChambeau and McIlroy down the stretch. DeChambeau is a very unique and individual, the way he approaches the game is very unique. He is entertaining to watch. I'll give him credit there. He's definitely got people's attention the way he plays the game. So, there's lots of great figures in golf. There's lots of great characters. I enjoy watching a lot of the different guys.
Got about 30 seconds left here. I got to ask you this one question. I know you're a Maple Leafs fan. Is this the year?
Oh, you were talking about Buffalo the other day, and my whole life, it's being a Leafs fan, I feel like a Bills fan. So yes, okay, let's go for it. We have the goaltending this year. I think they're going to make a run. Do they win? I don't know, but they better make a run this year.
Hey, David, this has been wonderful. Great to see you again. Hope things are doing well for you in Florida. Can't wait to see you on the Champions Tour as well, too. I know you're coming back to Ontario soon when the weather finally warms up. Dude, it's like it's almost zero today. You're in a great place right now. But for what you've done for junior golf, for what you've done to influence Canadians as golfers and as an athlete from this area, we're really proud of you and really appreciate what you've put together. And boy, whether you won or lost at the Canadian Open, you provided so many memories for us. So thank you so much for all you did and all you've done. And we certainly look forward to seeing you competing again too when you get back to the Open.
I appreciate you saying that, and thanks so much for having me today. I always try to put my best foot forward and be a good example for everybody. So, I'm going to continue to do that. And, who knows what's around the corner for me. I still have some good golf in me, so we'll see what happens. Thanks for having me, Bubba.
Go Leafs, go. Thanks for joining us, partner. That's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And you've just seen and heard, we love talking local sports with the local fellas who are getting it done. Now, if you do know of an athlete, team, or book, or anything to promote that's local and got to do with sports, we'd love to hear from you. Please hit that 5-star, and subscribe button if you have something to say. We really appreciate it. Also, please check out the other informative podcasts CHCH have to offer. For the outstanding people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. We'll see you tomorrow.